Let the people of Cincinnati stick to the truth that is written by the sun, moon, and stars. And this is a quote coming from the Cincinnati Commercial Gazette. I believe this must have been around 1880-ish. And this shows that our concept of time is not always as we understand it today, but had a very different connotation, really not all that long ago. And I believe that this quote is very indicative of the session that we held a few weeks ago, tied to the question of nature. And I was very fortunate to have Rebecca, Vic, Chris, and Julío on board. And I believe that some of the things that they talked about were not only very important, but they, for me personally, there are certain things that I look at differently simply based upon that of what they talked about. I was very moving for me, and I hope that it's equally as interesting for you. So let's get started.
Again, it's like through my own work, a lot of my comprehensions or my definitions or meaning flip on their head. You know, it's like the ketchup bottle used to be upright, and now in the grocery store it's upside down. Well, I'm like that. And the idea of waste for me was a huge insight. Trying to think of who it was. There was a conversation going on regarding waste and the idea that nature is so wasteful, it's ridiculous. I mean, and he gave the example of a cherry tree and the blossoms on one tree. Tens of thousands of blossoms, maybe one tree ends up seeding itself and, reproducing. Like, how inefficient is that? Our thinking around inefficiency, and that it's as wasteful as we are. So what's the problem? And, for the insight was recognizing that everything that fell off that tree was food for the next system, right? So it was a completely closed loop in the science language or the sustainability language that we use. It was a closed loop system because even though those cherry blossoms didn't seed to another tree, it was food for the worms or the microsystems of biology that were intercoursed with it. And then looking, into my engineering world in Silicon Valley and looking at the production process of a cell phone or whatever, and how singular, it's not closed loop. Most of it is just one direction. Find the stuff, extract it from the earth, build something into it, sell it to somebody else, gets done, and you throw it out. You make waste. And it wasn't designed for actually reintegrating with it at its end of life. Whether it's a cherry blossom tree or an iPhone, end of life should be food for the next system. So we have an entire society that builds waste very differently than nature builds or creates waste. And I think one of the greatest things we can learn, which was in my biomimicry work, was watching closely how nature wastes itself into a new life form or a new system. There is nothing that is left behind that toxifies the system, or very little. And we need to get back to that place. I'm not against making stuff. We just need to close the loop on anything we make and redesign from the front end. Not, okay, now we're done, and what do we do with this phone? Let's figure out how to recycle it. No, it's already too late. It has to be at the front end of the process. When we're about to create, we need to be responsible enough to recognize we've only done half the job if the system doesn't come back into itself. So I've devised a closed loop system that kind of recognizes that at a very high level. And but I don't see it happening. I still don't see it happening. We have a marketing program, an international marketing and corporate program that's designed to not regenerate, but to build the next version of things. And again, the next version is fine, but it's always trying to create new product that resells, and it's a one-directional thing. So let's close the loop. And then waste is sort of a word that doesn't even exist anymore.
Any thoughts from anybody else on that?
Yeah. Yep. When I compare the ecology, the economy. I always have trouble with that nature have no waste definition. That I don't fully agree with that, because we need to, and that's where economy goes wrong when try to go to the zero waste or no waste.
Mm.
That depends on the time frame. If you look at a very short time frame, like the tree that you, for example, what you have is lots of decaying flowers and leaves on the floor. But if you look in 20 years time, what you have is 1, 2 new trees. So those loops get closed, but they get closed on different time frames. And economy works at least 1 year time frame, and that's all. So we need to look at the different aspects. But I also have a trouble because when I say, for instance, what you have today in terms of life on the planet is consequence of waste. Oxygen is a waste. And that oxygen that was released into the atmosphere extinguished all the life that existed before. And a new life that could use oxygen prevail. So we are living based on waste from algae.
Mm.
If you go look to a coral reef, it cannot exist without the, let's say, waste from all the dead reef skeletons of reefs that build up the coral reef. So soil, if you look to the soil, there is lots of organic matter building up that we can say that is waste, and that will be recycled, that will be turned into nutrients, that will go back to the environment, to the trees, but at very variable cycles. So I like what I like to say is that no, nature have waste. Nature produce waste. It doesn't produce pollution. That's where's the difference. That's why it doesn't allow the waste to build up to the point where it is toxic to the system. So
Mm-hmm.
you have waste, but it doesn't pollute. Eventually, it happens when we have a eutrophication problem on a river or red tides or such. That's a case of natural pollution. But so when I see the guys from economy, mainstream economy, talking about no waste and closed loops and such. Also, closed loop is the idea that nature, everything is staying with everything. So the loops are the only closed system that we have is the planet itself. But everything on the surface of the planet is open to everything. Ultimately, yes, we can say that's closed. But when I see the economy trying to close the loop, I see that they are missing the big point that if you want to mimic nature, you need to mimic not only the cycles of nature, but the velocity, the turnover of those cycles. You must see that you have cycles that are very fast. For instance, on economic aspect, paper, you can have produce paper, recycle that at a very fast rate, much similar to leaf decomposing. But Yeah, going back to the tree case, a leaf, a flower will decompose within days, but the tree itself, if it falls, it will take weeks, months to decompose. There is the same process, but at different speeds. So the economy needs to go out of that. If it wants to go circular, it wants to close the loop, if you want to mimic those nature systems, cycles, you need to be open to work at all those different speeds, different velocities, rates, and instead of having everything closed in, let's say, 1 year time, you must accept that something will be closed in, something will work in weeks time, something will work in decades time, and you must adjust to that.
I like your point, Julio, about timing and the difference in the cycles, the time of the cycles. That's a very important point.
Chris, Becky, anything you'd like to
Yeah.
add to this subject? Chris, please.
Okay. Now let's see. First, nature is a great teacher, and in fact, if we are to have a future on Earth as humans, we have to emulate the ways of nature. This is a whole beautiful and highly intelligent organism which we are part of. And the thing is that every other living system on Earth is working for the survival of the planet. Look at the ants and so on and so forth. But it's just humans that are just trying to move away from what we're supposed to do also to continue the cycle of the Earth. This, what Mr. Vic said, and the question you asked, I actually said this in one of the conferences I attended, because we are looking at regenerative culture systems, and people were like asking, I told them that nature is actually wasteful, and they asked, everyone was like, what is this saying about? I said, yes, it's wasteful. But look at the scenario Mr. Vic gave of the cherry trees. We see that all over here. Sometimes even farmers could have abundant tomatoes and everything just lands in waste. But of course, it's wasteful, and its waste is used by other little organisms that are there. And why is it like this? Because it's just in a whole loop. It's just in a whole loop. And no one misses the loop. When it gets to your time, you join the loop. And when you're done with the loop, you come out. But it's just humans who are one of those, we don't even want to enter the loop. We're always outside. So next week, when looking at circular economy, which the world is looking at, people are looking at it as just a whole new scope to just enter, maybe to market their businesses and ways of sustainability and all that. But we should understand that who is the first circular economist? It's nature. It's been doing this over and over years, and the indigenous people have seen this over and over, and they've actually joined the loop. So what do we do now? When we make, we should try to, whatever we do, we should try to act as how nature will do. If you are a farmer, you're involved in agriculture, you should try to look at nature, regenerative farming of nature, and farm as nature does. The whole situation will change. If we are to grow our trees, if we are to grow our trees to offset our carbon footprints and all that, which I'm not against, we should try to plant our trees as how nature does. Sometimes we take a particular species of tree and take it to another place and say we're doing some a whole lot of bunch of reforestation, and instead of doing bunch of good to the environment, we're also doing it the wrong way to the environment. So we should understand how nature manages its waste also from our production to where the consumer lands, where it gets to the consumers. And the consumers themselves should understand that they are also part of the loop. So we shouldn't just throw away, we should use and get it done to avoid the depletion which we're going on. One, it will save us from deforestation, save us from excessive use of our resources, and get everything back to the loop. Thank you so much.
Sure. Becky, I really want to get your feedback, but I need to interject something here. Just piggybacking, Chris, on what you said, and also in alignment with Vic and Julio. The problem is that we keep trying to build all this in our own image. And it's all tied to the Anthropocene, because we keep thinking this is all based, we are the center of this universe. Apart from the fact that we've totally negated that we are part of the system. We think that we are above the system. We're part of it. If you think about this concept of life cycles, this is a purely human construct, because within, and I'm just piggybacking, Julio, on what you were talking about, within this time frame, there is no such thing as a life cycle. It is a continuous flow. So we should stop thinking in this linear fashion. Becky, sorry, I couldn't hold myself back any longer, but I'd like to give you an opportunity, obviously, to, because I'm very keen on your opinion, all that of what's been said so far.
I have really enjoyed everything that has been said so far. I've heard a lot in terms of going back even to the point that I made at the beginning, that our perspective is really shaping how not only we discuss these issues, it's also framing the solution to these issues. And a lot of times the perspective of us looking into the problem to mimic the way nature would solve it, it really leaves out one key perspective, that we are not really only in the situation and in the problem, we are the problem, and we are also the solution, because rather than us being a part of nature, I want us to really kind of expand that perspective to see what it would be like if we took the approach of we are of nature. One of the things that helps me a lot when I think about my relationship to nature is not just where I sit in it within my ecosystem, but also how I am of my ecosystem. I am of the planet. I am nature, because of how we have developed as a species. We are from this earth in the sense that we are earth. We are the systems, the chemicals, the life cycle. Nature is encompassed in us and of us, rather than us looking into nature for solutions. And I wonder how we would look at our problems or solve our problems if we had this perspective that not only are we part of nature in this cycle, but we are of nature. We are made from this planet's materials. We come from it. And so we can really have hope in human beings to be part of the solution as well, because we are part of the entire situation, and we are born from this situation we're in on planet Earth. You know, Chris's point, he had a great quote that humans are born to be biophilic, and what we do to nature, we do to ourselves. Vic had a great point of moving away from a sole focus on information to relationships, and how we can use that information to create solutions together. And that kind of diversity of thought reminded me of this great example of ecological law, that the more diverse an ecosystem, the more resilient that ecosystem is to change and disturbances. And so when you have this diversity of thought for problem solving, as well as, you know, Julio's point regarding that wonderful quote you had, it was problems from today are a result of the solutions from the past. And so taking in all three perspectives from all three speakers can really be a great framework for how we create solutions moving forward. You know, we talk about the exploitation of the planet. And when we talk about exploitation of the planet, we have to consider the reality that that will always be exploitation of people as well, regardless if there is a direct impact from the communities in that space to the indirect overall impact of we are harming ourselves through harming the planet because we are the planet. And so I think all three speakers today have touched on such a great point in this large problem that we have that really hits home, and how we decide to create not only solutions, but who is involved in creating those solutions, how we're implementing them, and ensuring that we're implementing solutions that are truly sustainable solutions that sustain positive impact over time and don't come back to create negative impacts. It was really great.
Nice, Rebecca. Nicely said.
That was so beautiful. That was a piece of art, and you almost made me cry. It was so beautiful. That was very positive. Can I just throw something in about our dysfunctional nature as human beings? And again, Becky, I'm going back to some of our conversations, and a very strong impression that you left on me and I don't even know how we got to this conversation, but it was I'm using my words, the idea of not just head, but hand, and the importance of using your hands. You had talked about working in the garden and how important that was for you. And that left a very strong impression for me. And I think about these things quite often. And I've come to the conclusion, I've kind of taken it, almost performed 180, where I understand that the separation is a figment of our imagination, that in fact the separation of head and hand actually makes us sick. And we see the tendency within our society that because we have eliminated, and I'm talking about somebody who's a little bit older, and I remember it wasn't always this way, that we actually did use our hands. And now we've gotten to the point where we can't use our hands. We don't even know how to use our hands. Now, I'd be curious, I'll throw this out to everybody, I see this as very strongly anchored within our subject matter. And it's the way that we interact. And that was a very clear message from all of you. Our interactions with the system and our interactions with each other. And I would say the way that we treat ourselves would be the third part of that equation. Any thoughts from anyone?
That's on a practical approach from this head to mind to hand use. If you go back to our grandparents, they knew how to grow their own food on the backyard. They have all the garden. I remember my grandmother had the tomatoes and all and spices and corn on the backyard. It's a small piece of a few square meters. It wasn't such a, but I don't know how to do that. We don't know. We miss that. But from what another important point, from my opinion, from what Beck said, is on this more social, human side, human aspects. We are not only related to nature, but to each other. And that's something that I like to remember. Every time that someone comes to talk to me about or advertise something about electric vehicles, I like, oh, that's cool. We wanted to save the environment, stop emission, cool. Are you paying for the slave child working in Congo for producing those batteries? Oh, that's okay. Only for the emission that you have now. So are you paying for those toxic lithium mines in Argentina, Chile? So there's now what should slave labor? What you talk about? And we need also to reconnect. We have today a very tragic example, which the Ukrainian war. A few months ago when it started, everybody was horrified. It was something terrible, but now it is normalized. It's okay. It's on the news every day. We see Russia putting that, Ukraine that, and okay, it's okay. What's the next step? We need to and there's people dying, there's children dying, and we just accept. It's like something that is not. We were talking here. We one problem that I was discussing earlier today on LinkedIn about the world hunger. We don't have a problem of food production to solve. We have a problem of waste. Every time that you waste food, there's a child dying of hunger. It could be saved, but for me, it all goes back to this connection, to reconnect to nature, be able to see a mountain on the horizon and thinking, oh, it's cool, it's beautiful, I like it, it makes me feel good. To the empathy to the other people, no matter if it's your neighbor, no matter if it's on Asia or whatever.
Anybody else like to dig in?
Well, two things come to mind. I'll throw them into the soup here. Maybe one of them bites. These are two directions. One is I'm gonna started thinking about this isolated thinking that we have, and one of the greatest issues I've had with the environmental movement and sustainability itself and the science thereof is that it's all isolated onto this planet. And what if, the Buckys of the world, the Einsteins of the world, Einstein said we can't solve the problem at the level what, and correlating that with Bucky's, which is if you're going to create something, start with the universe. And the idea of us being interwoven into something much bigger than this little pimple called Earth, and that again, this self-centering that we do around almost an arrogance around we're the problem, and there's a pride to we're the ones that made the problem. I mean, it's kind of a conundrum to me. And in order to get out of that arrogance, I call it blind arrogance, moving beyond the planet. And there's a lot of resistance, especially with a lot of the green movements, like with Musk going to Mars and, but we need to spend our billions here, which we do, fixing the problems here. But I don't think we're going to find answers to the problems until we can reflect back on the greater Earth itself and recognize that we do need to connect with the universe at the same time. Starting, with the moon way back when, it was transformative when we did that. There's all kinds of stories of whether we did or not, but I won't go there. Going to Mars, and what it does is provoke this isolated head into something bigger to recognize our relationship with the ecology of the universe. And to me, that is nature, but we leave it out of the equation. And what if we were able to bring that into our language and our science? We integrated. Right now, most people don't realize that the sun's at the end of its 12,000 year cycle, and it gets angry as hell in every 12,000 years. And it starts spitting, and it, we're worried about some country dropping an EMF bomb on us. I think the sun may beat us. And what are we going to do about that in terms of the nature of the sun and our relationship to it, and how we create a world that maybe can sustain the next angry spitting session it has, and to address that? It's such a scary thing. And this is where it becomes almost mythical to talk about these stories. And you read about these stories, and most people call them myths as to something that happened when the sun exploded, or started throwing spears of fire, you know, in the storylines of the ancient texts. It's all there, but we don't address it as truth. We address it as some storyline that we don't really have to address. So I'm bringing this in as a movement into the natural discussion, the nature discussion that we need to have. And what if we did? How would it change things? Any thoughts?
Oh, has anyone heard of the Kardashev Scale? Kardashev, I think is the way it said. I think he's a Russian author, sci-fi author who is a Russian author who talks about interplanetary speciesism basically as the power and level of a civilization is defined by their use of resources that is available to them in their different levels. So a level 1 civilization would be a civilization that utilizes the full power of its planet. And we're basically at like 70% of a level 1 because we still don't efficiently use the resources of our planet as effectively as we could. That's like literally, you know, solar power, geothermal things that can be regenerative or non-polluting and harmful to life, right? Because we want to build out civilization. Level 2 would be utilizing the power of the sun to its full extent. And then our level 3, our solar system. And then level 4, our galaxy. And then it's like level 5 is so advanced that you're creating consciousness and universes in and of itself.
Yeah.
This relate to a lot of this. But I just wanted to say, if you're interested in interplanetary speciesism, I am so fascinated by that. And Kardashev is a great kind of system to use for that scaling. But I agree in the sense of it takes a lot in transforming human consciousness to inform our perspective. And being able to take a step back and understand your place on the planet and then our planet's place in the universe. It is something that I wish so wholeheartedly was applicable to everyone on this planet for their ability and ability to do, because so much of the environmental movement and activism that we have is from a place of privilege for especially Western nations to come from a place where I am going to electively go to school and electively go to work and electively dedicate my career to environmental, human, and economic protection, and to not be able to give that to other people who are the ones suffering from the problems we're trying to solve. Yeah. It is something that I really wish I could extend to everyone on the planet because of how impactful it is to understanding your place on the planet when you know where you sit and your relationship to it. And I often think about the people who are at the other end of the solutions that we're talking about and just really wishing they had the socioeconomic and geopolitical stability to explore those questions and explore that relationship instead of being bogged down by the, systems they're suffering from in their place, in the place that they live.
Chris, Becky's asking for your opinion right now because you are a great example of when we talk about climate justice and we talk about being at the end of the chain. I think you are there. So perhaps maybe we can get your opinion on this.
Yeah. Well, I think completely resonate with what Julío said and Vic said. And it's just like what Becky said last on planetary issues. I also completely resonate with that. One thing is that from my own part of the world where I am in Africa, in Nigeria, it's a whole social issue, and I know it's also a complete not understanding of what we have on ground yet. We do not know ourselves more, and we kind of live only just for ourselves in form of ego or all that. And we should understand in the world today, and of course COVID-19 taught us that we need each other. The whole world is just connected. Yes, there was a lockdown, everyone was at home. And we saw that just one little virus affected the whole world. And we needed each other to survive by maintaining the necessary precautions for that. So we humans should stop living, we should stop living on the idea of isolation and all that. It's just like the sun and all that planetary bodies and the trees that are around. Yes, the plants need the sun. And we need the plants. Likewise, also needing the sun too. We need each other, despite the difference in our species composition. Yeah, look at the informations from some scientists found that from trees, that despite we looking at trees are just standing tall there and doing their own oxygen giving and giving us some fruits and beautiful things of life, there is a lot of things we don't fully understand about this with this structure. We don't really understand lots of it. Today we found out that trees, the mother tree, sends information to her children. Today through a network of fungal networks. And it's giving this information to tell them of the downloading this informations of acres of information and taking it down to the roots of the children, telling them, giving them histories of diseases, histories of plagues, histories of cuts and bruises. It's hard for the previous years and all that, and the children are just downloading that through the information. It's a complex system in our planet which we need to humble ourselves down and understand. We need to humble ourselves and understand. We should not look at a part of the world as not just important. Africa needs Europe, Europe needs Africa, America needs Africa, Europe needs America, and so on and so forth. That we are different, doesn't different in colors, shapes, and sizes. Plants doesn't really look at that. They just believe that you are plants is that you are a plant. You could be big, you could be fair, but we are the same. Yes, that we are the same. But to us human beings, oh, this is white, this is black. We are able to, he has a long nose, he's short, he's fat. The plants doesn't understand it because they believe you're all part of the whole beautiful biodiversity. If you continue to see just fat people in the whole world, it's not going to be a beautiful place. But nature gives you fat, it gives you short, it gives you tall, it gives you lean. No plant has same shape. Yes. So we need each other to survive in our planet. Thank you.
Yes, and I would agree that we do need each other, but it has to be based upon common respect and not exploitation. Number one, and how would it look? How would it have looked if we were in the West were to have had Ebola? I bet you we would have taken that one a little bit more serious than we have. Obviously, when we didn't take SARS-1 very seriously either, and so it's a question of clear prejudice, if you ask me, and that's why this whole thing with COVID has gotten blown out of proportion, because all of a sudden now we're affected, and this great machine that we created didn't work anymore because we didn't have a plan for it. Which is that really showed you how unnatural we work. So I'll get off my soapbox. I'm also very cognizant of time. I show 6 minutes to the end, and I want to give everybody an opportunity to give some sort of closing words. So maybe if we could start with you, Chris.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
I think I really enjoyed this section. Yeah, it's been long. I was involved in this kind of nature discussion. I almost missed it because I had a flat bar. So I had to rush back and charged it for 15 minutes to see that I could join. Then my neighbor had to bring something for me to power up the phone up. So I didn't want to miss it. And I thank God for the contribution that every one of us has made. It completely resonates with me. It completely moved me. And I think such discussion should be continued. So we could spread out this positive consciousness to people. We should spread it out so people can understand who truly they are. We ourselves could be enlightened about it, but what about others? And that's the reason why so many of these situations is being faced in our planet today. And humans are taking themselves away from the whole life cycle. So thank you so much, Michael, for this, and I'm grateful. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Vic, how about you?
I'm gonna close out with a question that came up for me. Actually, it was the nature of COVID. So one thing COVID has done that was positive in a way is it started to help us recognize that nations is a thing that we created, the idea of nations, because it doesn't know boundaries, it doesn't know borders. But the other thing that came up to me on that is, I don't know if some of you agree with this or not, but I've done some research on COVID. It was designed by a human. It was designed in an East Coast lab. It was moved over to China. These are experiments that military labs are doing, and some of these things are getting out, whether deliberately or accidentally. And my question around it is how does this behavior, our human kind of dark behavior, fit into the natural system? I'm not saying I have an answer for that, but I want to leave it with that thought for myself as well as the rest of you. This has been fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Vic. Julio, how about you?
Hi. Okay. Yes. Michael, I'd like to thank you for this initiative. I think that when we have this opportunity to just talk without a subject, a specific topic, or etc., just exchange ideas randomly, I think that's brainstorming that is amazing. So lots of synergies and lots of topics emerges, and we start to derive from one topic to another. That's very productive, very insightful, and personally, I love this kind of discussion, this kind of interaction, and looking forward for the next one. Thank you.
And we know who's following up. Becky.
Sorry.
Oh, you
Yeah,
didn't
no,
hear it? Oh, was I on mute? Oh, sorry. No,
I was muted. I couldn't for
Okay.
some reason hit the remote. No, I'm thankful for the conversation today. I think personally, I have always felt that my own storage of energy is always replenished when I talk with people. I find people to be the most sustainable form of power on the planet. And talking with all of you today has hit that point home again, because it really fills me with hope and inspiration and excitement to continue on when I see other people are doing the same, because, you know, my energy is from, I guess, originally given from the earth anyway. And if people are from the earth, then my energy is going to be replenished by people constantly. And I think focusing on our perspective of nature really helps us understand the influences of our personal relationship with it, of it, and how it will influence the activation necessary to preemptively nurture and protect, rather than reactionarily trying to save it. And I think focusing on where our perspective is will help us understand where our place is. It'll help us understand how to protect what we care about.